Welcome to the Avro Heritage Museum podcast. Our host today is again Chris Beswick from the Talking Newspaper. In this episode of the Avro Story, we take a fascinating journey into the cockpit of the iconic Avro Vulcan with former pilot Trevor Jackson. He shares his unique experiences and insights from his distinguished flying career during the Cold War era. Discover the intricacies of piloting this remarkable aircraft, its roles and the technology that made it a formidable presence in the skies. Join us for an engaging discussion filled with nostalgia and the realities of military aviation.
Hello and a very warm welcome to episode 4 of the Woodford Story. In episode 2, we went into the cockpit of one of Aviro's emblematic Second World War aircraft, the Lancaster. Today, we're in the cockpit of another Avro aircraft from a different era, the Vulcan. And I'm absolutely delighted that, just as before, we have a wonderful guide who served on this plane as part of a distinguished flying career and who knows it inside out. Trevor Jackson. We know, Trevor, you're very much in demand, so we particularly appreciate your giving up your time for us today in this episode that we've called It's a Cold, Cold War. Trevor, a very, very warm welcome.
Good morning. You're more than welcome.
Can you tell us, first of all, Trevor, at what point did you begin to set your sights on becoming a pilot? I knew I wanted to be a teacher from about the age of 10, actually. Was it later than that, sooner than that for you?
About exactly the same. In fact, it was my 10th birthday. I just wanted to become a pilot in the Royal Air Force. So I joined the Royal Air Force in 1961, and I became associated with the Vulcan in 1967. And I last flew her in 1977.
And what was the career and training path that ultimately led you to the Vulcan pilot seat?
Well, after the basic training, which for me was on the Jet Provost, people would be streamed onto a fast jet or piston aircraft. I went on the fast jet, which was at RAF Valley in Anglesey, and I flew the Gnat. Other people would go to Oakington in those days and would fly the Varsity. And it was whilst at Valley that my flight commander was looking at where to send people and asked how I felt about going onto the Vulcan. So I said I had no particular desire to or antagonism against it. And so I went to RAF Finningley for the operational conversion unit, where just like in the war, we constituted a crew, and we did our basic flying on the Vulcan from RAF Finningley, which is now Doncaster Sheffield Airport.
And when you made that choice, you were saying it was another plane, but was there a special aura about the Vulcan at that time, or, like you say, was it just another plane?
For me, it was just another plane. I mean, like most young men, one wished to go and fly fighters and go whizzing around the sky and doing aerobatics. As it turned out, the Vulcan itself was pretty manoeuvrable anyway. And
do you still have a clear memory of that first flight with your crew?
Oh, absolutely. It's funny to call it a solo flight because there were 5 of us, the 2 pilots, the navigator radar, the navigator plotter and the air electronics officer. But we got into the aircraft and we were going through our checks, and the navigator radar tuned into the BBC radio, and I distinctly remember there was a song at the time, and it was played on the radio there, Shelley Mann's Up, Up and Away. And that became, I suppose, the theme tune, and off we went and flew this aircraft. I can't remember for how long, I'd have to look at the logbook. and went back, bashed the circuit for a few times, landed, and we probably went and had a drink in the bar after that.
It's a good time now, I think, Trevor, to talk us through the layout, because we're actually in the cockpit. So could you just describe, who sat where and what the different functions were?
Well, as you can see, the cockpit is on two levels here. Well, first of all, getting into the aircraft is a bit of a difficult struggle because you've got to climb up two ladders. Now, there are three gentlemen in the back and the two pilots at the front on a higher level, so we had to climb up another ladder. The two pilots are injection seats. The three gentlemen in the back, starting on one side, you've got the navigator radar, who was effectively the bombardier. In the centre, at the back here, we have the navigator plotter, who was the original navigator. And over on the other side is the air electronics officer, who was responsible for the electrics of the aircraft, because this is a pure electrical aircraft. Without electrical power, this aircraft doesn't fly. He was also responsible for all the electronic countermeasures. So if there were any threats to the aircraft, he was the one who fired off the decoys, the silver paper, or jammed the radars or the communications of the incoming aircraft.
I think when people watch films, especially Second World War films, they get this image of the bomber being slower, not very manoeuvrable, and very vulnerable to faster fighter planes that go up to intercept them. But that's not entirely, well, by no means the case, is it really, with this plane? It was fast and it was manoeuvrable.
It originally flew so high and so fast, no enemy aircraft was going to get near it. And of course, missiles hadn't been invented at that stage either. So the aircraft in the Mark I, it was given no defensive capability at all. However, of course, the advance in technology soon realised that the aircraft was extremely vulnerable. So the Mark II was developed, of which we are in here. It's an entirely different aeroplane in many respects, because the wingspan was increased from 99 feet to 111 feet. The engine power was upped from 14,000 to 17,000 pounds of thrust, and then subsequently 21,000 pounds of thrust. And it was full of electronic countermeasures. So it became an aircraft that could defend itself. Well, when I say defend itself, we didn't have any offensive stuff whatsoever, but the manoeuvrability of the aircraft was such that we could outturn a Lightning.
So when you're flying at maximum height, above presumably is black, it's not blue, is it? I mean, you're at such a height.
We went on exercise out in Australia, and we would wear partial pressure breathing apparatus, which allowed us to go to our maximum altitude, which was very high indeed. We're up to 60,000 feet, and you could see the curvature of the Earth very markedly, and the sky above you was black.
And you've got, am I right, 4 Rolls-Royce Olympus engines, and are those similar to the ones used in Concorde actually later on?
Well, the Olympus engine first appeared in the aircraft after the prototype had first flown with Avon engines. It was put in the second prototype, and at that stage it was 10,000 pounds of thrust. And then over the years the thrust power went up until, as I said, in this particular aircraft we had the 21,000 pound thrust engines, and they were developed because the aircraft was going to carry Skybolt, the American standoff weapon, which in fact the Americans cancelled, and so therefore Skybolt never appeared. Subsequent to that, the Olympus was further developed for the Concorde, where it got up to 45,000 pounds of thrust with full reheat. We call it an Olympus. Interesting enough, the company approached the government at the time and asked for money for development of the engine for Concorde, and the government said, sorry, there's no money for any new developments. So they very cleverly stuck the name Olympus on the side of it and said, look, it's an Olympus engine. And at that stage the government said, oh, in that case then there is money available, and so the rest became history, as it were. But the Olympus that was in Concorde had an entirely different concept, because it had to go supersonic. And of course the Olympus that we've got here, there was no way that this was going to go at Mark II.
Trevor, could you tell us a little bit now about the different roles and missions for this aircraft? Because when the Ministry of Defence put out the design to tender, for which Avro got the contract, what things did the MOD want the aircraft to be able to do?
And primarily, it was going to be a nuclear bomber. We did not have a nuclear bomber at that time, but that was being developed separately. They also wanted the aircraft to carry conventional bombs, 20,000 pounds of high explosive bombs. So this particular aircraft eventually did carry a single nuclear bomb, or we could carry 21 1,000 pound high explosive bombs. There was another variant of the Vulcan Mark II which carried the blue steel standoff weapon, which was developed here at Woodford by Avro, and that went on to the aircraft that were at Scampton, 3 squadrons there, and that is all they did. They were blue steel. It only had a range of 100 nautical miles, whereas we at Waddington, we could do both of them. And indeed, we would go and drop conventional bombs on the bombing range. Obviously, we never ever dropped a nuclear weapon, otherwise you'd know all about that. So therefore, we had a dual role. Subsequent to that, once the nuclear role had finished, the aircraft was developed for maritime reconnaissance and also air sampling. And in its final role, it was converted into a tanker, and it was doing air-to-air refueling.
Of those roles, Trevor, the one that's the most chilling and therefore perhaps the most fascinating is that key role in the Cold War that you've mentioned as the deliverer of the UK's nuclear weapons. And I know you did long service on this. Could you explain just how it worked? I know the Americans, they kept planes in the sky 24 hours. Our model was cruise on constant standby, wasn't it? How did that work?
Right. Well, the crews would be on quick reaction alert, QRA, for 24 or 48 hours. We had a bomber box that beeped every 30 seconds to let us know that it was live. And the bomber controller could raise our alert level because we were on 15 minutes readiness to go to war. The aircraft were all primed, fueled, and the nuclear weapon was armed. And he could raise that alert level to 5 minutes readiness or 2 minutes. If it was 5 minutes, we'd race out to the aircraft, just as they did during the Battle of Britain, except we did it in the crew bus. That was at Waddington anyway. Other stations did it slightly differently. We'd start the engines, and then he'd revert us back to 1.5, and we go back for a cup of tea and a biscuit. He could also raise us to 0.2. Now, that was rock and roll time, because we would use the rapid start button on the start, which fired up all 4 engines immediately, and we would taxi onto the runway, and we were then ready to go and bring heat and light to the Soviet Union, but we needed the secret codes to know whether we were going to do that. Obviously, the fact that we're here today meant that we never ever did that, and we always went back for the cup of tea and the biscuit. So that was how it worked. We never ever flew with nuclear weapons. We would go to our dispersal airfields around the country, of which there were 36, and we would carry dummy weapons, and we could be held on 15 minutes readiness up to 28 days at these dispersal airfields, but we'd only go there for 3 days maximum normally. Then there would be a dummy alert. We would get airborne, go off on exercise, and then go back to our home bases.
And of course, you knew, if the orders had ever actually come through to take off, that Armageddon was very close. Once you dropped your payload, where are you supposed to go? Because presumably there wasn't enough fuel to get back to the UK or to get to anywhere, was there?
Well, it depended on what your target was. Some of them, yes, there was sufficient fuel to come back to the UK, but what was there to come back to anyway? Some of the targets were so deep there was no chance of that, and so our escape was to go to a third country. How they felt about that, well, we never ever found out, but we would just speculate about going to some tropical island somewhere drinking beer. which of course was just a pipe dream.
And how about getting out of the aircraft in emergency? How did that work?
Right, well, the two pilots, we had ejection seats, so that was just a simple case of either pulling the blind above your head or the one between your knees, which immediately fired off the canopy, and a second later you would go off up the rails and everything was automatic. For the three gentlemen in the back, they had to go out through the door. Now, the parachute was on their back. They were connected to the static line, so once they went out, the parachute would deploy. Of course, they had the ripcord. There was a problem, though. The nose gear is immediately behind this entrance door. So if for any reason the undercarriage was down and they slid down that door, at best they would get a very nasty nosebleed. So they had to develop a technique of grabbing hold of the door opening strut, swinging round to avoid the nose gear if it was down, and then off they would go. In the top here we had a multi-seat life raft, so if we ever ditched, we could all get into this life raft and sing sea shanties until somebody came and rescued us. We pilots, we sat on our single-seat life raft, so we had either system if that ever happened. That's how we got out. In the event of a crash landing and you couldn't get out through the entrance door, we would have to jettison the canopy and we'd all go up over the top here and slide down the side.
And looking back on that era then, it seems to me there's a mix of probably quite a bit of waiting around on the one hand and amazingly high adrenaline moments on the other. How did you sleep at night? I mean, it's hard to imagine really. It was an amazingly responsible role, wasn't it?
We never really thought about it too much at the time. We just got on. And we were on exercise. Exercises would be called on a regular basis, usually at about 4 o'clock in the morning, which disturbed everybody around in married quarters, of course. But on QRA, we would play cards, make model aeroplanes. Some chaps were writing books. You just got on with life as best you could and as normally as you could, and that was that.
It was a job that had to be done, and you did it really well. The plane has got into the public imagination. It's in lots of novels and films and so on. The one that most people remember is Thunderball. They didn't get the facts right on that one, though, did they?
Well, there was a little bit of artistic license there. You cannot put poison into the oxygen system, and two, there is no connecting door from the bomb bay into the cockpit here.
I think sometimes, to round off, Trevor, when we look back, it's not always the big dramatic moments that you remember. Are there any sort of quieter, more everyday ones from that amazing period that seem to sort of capture it for you?
I suppose really the most enjoyable bit was flying the aircraft around the world, ostensibly to go out to Australia and do air defence exercises with the Royal Australian Air Force, which was great fun. Going off to the bombing ranges and dropping various payloads.
Trevor, it's been an absolute pleasure and a privilege to have this conversation. Thank you so much, and thank you for protecting us in those Cold War times. Next time we hear from the people who worked at Woodford in its heyday. Please join us then, but in the meantime it's goodbye from the Vulcan cockpit from me, Chris Beswick, from our special guest Trevor Jackson.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Make sure you follow us in your podcast app to ensure that you don't miss out on future episodes.